dear me.
I want to welcome Cygnet Brown. She is from Springfield, Missouri, and she is a self-published author, yes. And she has graciously donated her time to come and visit with us and talk about her book. She has quite a collection. She does history to romance and gardening. Beautiful books. I mean, you need to take a moment and look at them. We will be going up to King Bean afterwards, so you can purchase the books, and she'll sign them.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I got pens.
Yay! Okay. So I will ask you to please mute your cell phones, and let's give our undivided attention for
All right.
time she would like to speak.
Well, I'm going to first of all thank the library and the Friends of the Library for inviting me here. I love your T-shirts. I saw it on Facebook too. I like the slogan.
Yeah, it's really neat slogan.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I was born in, well, I'm not going to tell you what year, but I'll give you a hint. I was born the same year that Barbie was created. Not that we have anything to do with each other, but I feel like that's where it's from. Okay. My first, I kind of was born a storyteller, I think, because my first memory is of a story on television. Anybody remember Lassie?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, anyway, that's my first memories of Lassie. I remember, now, mind you, I was very, very young because I was still in my walker. I wasn't walking yet. And yet I remember seeing Lassie on my mom and dad's television set, going over to it, touching the screen and feeling the static, you know? You know what I'm saying? When I was 3 years old, my dad said, I don't remember this, but my dad, and my dad doesn't lie. So anyway, he was telling me that when I was 3 years old, he said, Daddy, I want to tell you something. And I sat down and told him the story, television show again, you know, I think at that age, you know, you kind of, anyway, of this guy named Stony Burke. And Stony Burke was a cowboy. Anyway, and some girl liked him. And I was three years old. He said that show had been on for 6 months. So this memory of mine, of this story. So like I said, I'm telling stories from the time I was really little. I remember when I was little, I'd sit at the table and listen to the adults talk, you know, the stories that they would tell. I'm sure all of you remember the stories that your parents and relatives told at the table. And my aunt, she, you know, would be quietly listening, and she said, you gotta watch those quiet ones. You don't know what they're thinking. Well, I was thinking about writing a book, I guess. So anyway, I, you know, got a little older and I started school. You know, I didn't start school until the first grade. They didn't have kindergarten back then where I went to school. And remember the Sally, Dick, and Jane books? I was born on, I mean, I grew up with those books. Those were my first things. And what I remember best about that was our teacher would have this flip chart up there. And she would have the picture up there and she'd have the words under it. And then she'd have us describe the picture. So we had to describe the picture. And that was like part of my training, you know, in being a storyteller. Then when I was in the 4th grade, my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Wilkinson, introduced me to history. And the history book we had was really neat because it didn't, you know, cover dates and it didn't cover wars and stuff. It was about people. And I remember this one story, just a minute. Anyway, I remember this one story where Samuel Adams, John Adams' cousin, he was in jail for some reason. I don't remember, I think it told it in the thing, but I don't remember that part. Anyway, he was talking to a Hessian soldier that was guarding him, and he talked the Hessian soldier into going from the British side to the American side. It's funny the things you remember, you know? I don't remember any of the other stories, but I do remember that. That book started me in my love for history. I mean, because I realized then that history is like his story, you know, it's a story. And that's kind of what I always look for in history is the story. And I don't care about the dates. I definitely don't care about the wars. But tell me about the people. So, also that same year, when in Mrs. Wilkinson's class, she introduced me to Laura Ingalls Wilder, which I'm sure you've heard of. I mean, I know you know because you've got the book there. Okay, now I lived in northwestern Pennsylvania. Now the story of that book got all the way up there. This is before the TV show. Okay, so anyway, I fell in love with the stories. I knew all this, before the television show was ever on, I knew everything about them. I'd read the West from Home and the entire series. I'd read the first 4 years, all of it. One of the things I noticed, my dad would talk about it, is that Laura had a way of describing things and going into detail. You know, he always liked that, and I picked up on that, you know. And I think a lot of the way she writes influenced a lot of the way I write. Now, mind you, my voice is a lot different than hers, but I do think I picked up some things from her. Then when I reached the 7th grade was when I actually started writing. I went nuts over writing. It was Mrs. Watson's English class, and Mrs. Watson had assigned us to do a project called, it was a very wrong number, you know, and it was about we were to write a story about a wrong number that we got on the phone. You know, this is back shortly after, remember Party Lines?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember Party Lines too. And you know, dial up. We didn't have ID, color ID. Yeah, we didn't have any of that. So anyway, so I started writing, and I wrote, and I didn't stop writing until after, especially after high school. Then life kind of got in the way, you know, of my writing. So I joined the military. I was in the Navy. Got married, got divorced, had children, got married again, had another child. And shortly after that, I started making writing more of a full-time kind of a thing where I wanted to write all the time. And during that time that I was going through life, I had a dream about a girl and a boy. He was sitting on one end of a rustic bench. She was sitting on the other end of a rustic bench. And they were sitting in front of a log wall. Okay. So I knew, don't ask me what, but I knew they were in a fort. And they were interested in, she looked at him and he looked at her and he goes, haven't I seen you somewhere before? You know, the famous old line, you know. But she goes, yeah, I think so. And then I kind of woke up. But anyway, it's like that story kept sticking in my mind, like, I gotta do something with that, I gotta do something with that. But during that time, I mean, I always liked to read books, and one of the things I would do is I went to the library, and I went and saw this old book, this series of books, actually, several volumes of books called Parkman's Works. And it was of the French and Indian War, and the Pontiac's conspiracy afterwards. And so you know, you think, it was a dry old book. There were dry old books, but I was looking for the stories. And I found one, of course, really neat just now. There was a wagon train that was going to Fort Schlosser in New York State. Anyway, there was a hill here, the road was here, fairly narrow road, then there's a 200-foot drop into a ravine. And these guys were going, these soldiers were going along this road, and some Indians came over the hill and literally pushed the wagon train right over into the ravine. The drummer boy survived. And the only reason he survived was because as he was going over, his drum strap caught on a branch on the edge, and so he climbed up over onto the edge and found out that everybody else had been killed, except for Mr. Stedman, which was the scout that was with him. He ran on ahead. So I'm thinking, okay, how can I combine this story of this homeless boy and with this story? So what I did was I combined it by okay, the girl's name was Elizabeth, the boy's name was Philip. Elizabeth went back to Boston from there. She went back to Boston, and she lived with moved in with her sister. The boy went to England and lived with he lived with the commander of the fort, went back to England to live. So the boy was raised by him. Years later, in 1774, she's living in Boston. She's a spy, a smuggler and a spy. And he comes back as a British officer, and he is quartered at their house there in Boston, which is something that actually happened. Not that this person, but anyway, so you get this, you see the conflict there. She's a patriot, he's a British officer. How does this end up? Well, that's for you to find out from the story. Anyway, while he's quartered at their house, she and her sister are in the living room talking, and they're talking about their parents who were indentured servants. I thought, indentured servants? I need to learn more about these people. So I went back and I wrote their story. So the first book, When God Turned His Head, is their story. And, I kind of gave something away there because the mother was accused of killing her husband. The story was, that's another story from history, was that I found that there was a man named John Codman that was killed. And he was murdered by, he had arsenic. Arsenic was put into his cocoa. Most people don't know that cocoa was available back then. It was a little different than today because it was more like coffee then than it is now. But he drank arsenic in his coffee. He was death by chocolate. Yeah.
That sounds like a book.
So anyway, the reason this is called the Locket Saga, and the Locket Saga, it started with When God Turned His Head, then went to Soldiers Don't Cry, which is about the story about the boy and the girl. And then the next book in the series is The Coward Solace, and the next one is Sailing Under the Black Flag, and the last one I just finished this spring, In the Shadow of Mill Pond. That's book 5. And there's 6 and 7 are in process. Actually, there's another one further down the way that's also in process. That was that. I've also written some nonfiction books. I've got 4 of them up there. One, Living Today, isn't out yet. It was supposed to be out, and if you look at the cover, it's like over the words are too far over, so I've got to bring them back in. So that's why it's not. I wanted a perfect book before I put it up for public use. So Jana, although I don't have any other copies of it, Jana claimed that one. So so it's sold. Yeah, it's sold, and it's not even a good copy. The other 3 books I wrote were Simply Vegetable Gardening. I know you don't believe this. I've been writing as long as I have been gardening as long as I have been writing. So I've been writing since I was 12, and I was gardening since I was 12. I got this thing into organic gardening when I was 12. I liked the concept, of taking the garbage and turning it into black gold. And so I've learned a few tricks over the years, and that's how Simply Vegetable Gardening came about. Then, because there was only 2 products that I ever used in my garden that wasn't or that I bought. The only 2 things I bought were kelp and diatomaceous earth. So I did a little bit more research on each one of them, and I wrote the diatomaceous earth one, like I said, and then the help from kelp. Like I said, the most recent book that I've got there, I'm repeating myself here. Living Today, The Power of Now. It's not a gardening book. It's a inspirational self-help kind of thing, So, and there's another book that I'm working on. It's called Write a Book to Ignite Your Business. So that's kind
It's
of
called what?
Write a Book to Ignite Your Business.
Oh, okay.
And it's more of a, taking my experiences as a self-publisher and putting it all in one place so people know how to self-publish if they wanted to self-publish. But that's getting ready to go to the editor very shortly, like within the next couple of weeks. So, that's Confessions of a Storyteller. Do you have any questions, any comments?
Your series, are they
Yes.
standalone, or do you have
They
to
are-
read each and every one of them?
They are standalone, probably so much so that there's some people that have read the series are like, they don't connect as well as, they would like, but I liked it. I mean, there's other people that really enjoy it, and they can't wait for the next book to come out, so. But, I mean,
But they are standalone?
yeah, they can be standalone. Mhm. So you could start with a Coward Sowler, but you could start with Coward Sowless and kind of get the idea. Most of the, like I said, I started writing Soldiers Struck High first, but I ended up finishing When God Turned His Head before that. So, but you can see the tie-in between the two different books. I mean, you can see the connections, but you can also see the stories that are standing alone. Any other questions? It's only been 20 minutes.
Your help from kelp, is that?
Oh, kelp from kelp. Yeah, kelp. You can get. Excuse me. My mouth is all of a sudden really, really dry.
We have that effect on people
And the cameras. I need the water for the camera staring at me.
I asked him. I asked him to bring that. So.
It's
Don't
your
blame
fault.
him. It's my own fault. Right. Kelp from kelp. I have learned from kelp. I have a secret with kelp. If you take a little bit of kelp powder, and put it into your planting holes when you plant tomatoes, you will not. Let's put it this way. I have never gotten